Hey again, y'all. Appreciate you coming to check it out and hang out a little bit here in the barn. What we have here, the best I can tell, is a 1999 Manco Deuce, like model 618. So it might be a Super Deuce, something. 18 horse Honda. Bought it engine locked up. Found a 10 millimeter socket. Somebody dropped down inside the flywheel cover, and that's what was locking up. So now it runs like a top. And it wasn't a problem until I saw some oil leaking from underneath it, and it's coming out of the transmission. So it's out. The bad thing about these is, of course, they don't make this anymore. Out of business. You can find a few parts. I was lucky to find out that I had the Dana Spicer instead of whatever other one was, and you can't, so I got to looking when I took it apart. This side and that little differential carrier should be a bushing, just like this one. Now this one has got some wear on it, but it's not bad, and it just kind of slips in there, and I believe it's supposed to be press fit, and this one is just not anymore. The one on the other side, and of course there's a seal there. This seal wasn't leaking very bad, just a little, but this one was puking. You see the old oil, but if you look down in there, chunks of bushing. So there is quite a bit of rust in there. I don't know if you can see it or not, to the rust. So I didn't do it. It had been that way for a while. And what started the whole problem is these mounting holes. There's only 2 holes on one side with a couple of nuts as a spacer that hang it from the motor bracket, and there's only one on the other side. Well, you can't tell, those holes are stripped. There's nothing left of them. I think this side was the side that 2 were, and you can see that the holes are not in very good shape. It's kind of hard to see. The thing is, we have all these other holes. So once I get this fixed, we'll build a bracket that goes all the way around on both sides with welded nuts out here to space it out where it needs to be, and it should be a whole lot stronger. And it bolts up like 2 bolts on the front, so the whole thing was going up and down every time you hit a bump, and it'd move around, and that's what chewed those up. Luckily, it looks like I've saved the axles. Let me see. One has some obvious wear to it. The other one is in good condition. So I think it's passable. I think I can still get these axles if I need to, but we're going to go with this for now. So, seals. I found some seals. They use this same transmission in golf carts, some lawn mowers, and other go-karts. So I took a chance and just bought a couple different seals, and luckily enough I got 2 that are going to work. The problem with the bushing is you can't, that's not a replaceable part. I've never found a part number for it. I believe it's the axle, the carrier, I would call it, and these come in it. Now I've got a way to fix that, I believe, and I'm going to show you how and what parts there are and this and that. Hopefully it goes good. We'll have this thing going again. The 5-year-old keeps asking about it, and Daddy likes it too. So, you want to see what color that fluid is? Kind of bronzy. Imagine that. Alright, let me get this thing flipped over, tore apart. We'll see what we got. Alright, got her apart. This has a long shaft going down where the torque converter pulley mounts on. The shifter shaft is right here, and there's a bolt-in something that I saw, which told me that it needed to be this way, and I could take this half off. Now, hopefully you can see that. I'll probably bring you down here in a minute and show you all the bronze, all the rust. So this little manual transmission has had water in it. I think it's savable. You know, it's not for highway use, so we just put around the yard at 35 miles an hour. We'll get this all apart. I'll bring it down real quick first and show you the carnage. Get it all took apart, spread out on a table over here that I have over here. And then I'm going to address my little bushing issue and make sure that's going to work before we go further. Lots of fun. Yeah, nice little chunk of bronze there. See the rust? The rust. You know, this thing's been abused and then put up wet, sat and sat. I'm guessing it sat for probably 10 years. Now, these aren't hard so far, I can tell, to take apart, but for me, I've done manual transmissions for 33 years, along with automatics and all that. You know, transfer cases, this reminds me of a transfer case really more than anything. And these two halves get sealed with what's called anaerobic sealer. I believe I can still get some. It's sort of a red colored, you can see it on some of these bolts right there. It's like a red gooey, it only hardens up in the absence of oxygen. But if I can't, we can use some high quality RTV. You just have to use it very sparingly, just enough. Anaerobic sealer is made to squish out so that these machine places and everything that needs to go where it's going to go, it doesn't take up clearance and add to that clearance. But you can if you use it nice and thin and you do it the right way. See these bearings? They carry these. That bearing goes in there. It's not a big deal. Let's get her spread apart. We'll put her on this table, because that's what a good transmission guy does with one he doesn't know. So it all goes back together. Yep. Alright. Couple interesting things. The shaft hole, which is, that's where your torque converter mounts to, goes into the transmission and does its magical thing. There's a seal inside here. Let me flip this up and I'll show you. That seal right there is the same as the axle seals. So, since I have extra, I have a new seal for that. Awesome. I was worried about that. There's also a seal for the shift lever that goes through there. I have that seal, which is this thing right here. And of course our shift lever that mounts to that's all wallered out, so I have to fix that, and we'll change it to a push-pull cable. I'll show you that later. So see downside here where there should be a bushing. There should be a bushing like this. It presses in there. Well, this one's kind of wallered out and the other one is non-existent. So I go to the hardware store and find this. Feels perfect with my hand on the outside. I didn't take my caliper measuring tool with me, and I probably should have, but I found this, and I also found this. It's the same size, inside and outside. I'm going to go with this first because you can see I got a mark where I need to cut it off. This is brass. It's a little bit harder than the copper. use the copper in a pinch, but I'm gonna go with this. And boy, it fits just right. It's gonna pop right in there. So I'm gonna tape those marks off, get it cut, make sure it fits on my axle shafts good. As long as it feels good, I'm gonna ram her in there. It'll clean the rust out of them holes. That way, if there's excess sticking out, I can go ahead and sand it off. Also, I've got to make a little oil passage. There's one right there. There's another one right there. So I've got my little deburring tool inside the new one, the brass one, and just cut a small groove in it. It's just a little bit something to get the oil to come through. I'll do that. Now I'll just wait a long time. Well, I come up with something. It's not the best of something, but it's something. We have bushings in here now. There's the original. And you can look at it and see, because of how it is, this little ridge, it walked out and doesn't press fit anymore. You can push that in, take it out, whatever, up to that little line. That's where it was in here rolling around and pushing up against the seals. And of course the other side just, the other side as well. There it is. That's all bushing. What I came up with, I tried, you can take a 1-inch copper and it slides in, but it doesn't press in. It's also too big on the inside. I tried PEX brass fitting, same thing. My worry is that I put something in here and it moves around and it tears up my seal again. If the housing is mounted solid where it's supposed to be and the axles stay where they're supposed to be, you basically don't really need a bushing. It's just to help keep it in line if something gets out of place, right? Because even the original has some wear in it on the inside, on the axle side, but it's not bad. So, of course, the axles aren't worn real bad right there, believe it or not. Yeah, I tried all kind of stuff. And no, the little automatic drill press feed deal didn't work. Maybe if I was patient enough, then I'd had to still machine the outside somehow to get it to fit. It's probably the way to go if I was a machinist and I want to pay a guy a couple, $300-400 to make me a couple bushings. That's probably the best thing to do. But these bushings, oh, there's another one of my bimetallic material ideas. That didn't work out because by the time I got that machine down to fit right on the axle like I wanted, this PEX insert that I cut and pressed in here, it'd be so thin that it probably wouldn't have worked out. Besides that, this is that 1-inch copper and it wouldn't press in solid like I would want anyway. Anyhow, these bushings are what they call torque converter bushings because I bought 2 of them hoping that they were the correct ones, but they're not. They're too big. Thickness is about the same as the original. So what I did was I put a cut in them, and maybe you can see. See a little cut right there? And I kept cutting it to where it would just barely press in here. So now it's a nice press fit, sanded it down, good enough. Heck with it. I can have this thing all tore apart just like this in a couple hours if I had to. So now, we're done with that. I got one on the other side too. It's ready to go. Just needs cleaned up. So the next thing, clean up all the rust that I can. All the bearings seem good. Using fiber roller lock. Get everything all cleaned up. Then I need to make brackets. You can see hole stripped out. Clean up all these holes. I'm going to make a bracket, good solid steel bracket that bolts in the rest of these holes once I get them, you know, cleaned up and the threads working good again. Big welded nut for the original bolt and welded spacers so that's solid. Where it mounts up, it's solid. Something just fell. Oh. Great. Shimmage. I bet that went right there. Alright. On down the road. Let's get her done. Alright. Got her cleaned up. I cheated and I took the case halves to work and put them in the parts washer. Let them run for about an hour and there you go. If you don't have access to something like that, just get you a gallon of mineral spirits and a bucket and a toothbrush and start cleaning. Finish off with some brake clean and it'll look like this. Just takes a little more time. Now, these two holes are what mounted the back of this case to the underside of the motor. The engine, excuse me, the engine bracket. And the space between the bracket and this was the amount of these two nuts. So what happened, one was missing. The remaining three were stripped out so that the back end of this transfer case or this transmission would move up and down. Being these are live axles, you have a bearing out here that stays stationary with this moving up and down. That's what chewed up my bushings, tore up my seals and all that. So whose idea was to just do that? I guess it was alright for it to not last very long, or I don't know. I could be a whiny ass, but that's just what I believe. So I have a better idea. I did rethread them. There's a little bit of thread in there, but not by much. These holes were not threaded. They were drilled but not threaded. So I imagine in this application and similar ones for this transmission, Dana said, hey, it's easier to just tap these two and you know, leave the rest of them blank. And the way I figured that out, in some parts diagrams, there's axle tubes that are mounted to this similar style transmission. Well, I found out that this is a 3/8 by 16 pitch thread. Got a tap. Good old Harbor Freight, $16. I already had it anyway, but if you need to do this, go buy it. Get them started nice and straight, work them in. Nothing, you don't have to drill anything. You just put the threads in. The bolts go right in like a dream. So, but to fix this problem is why I'm threading these. So, masking tape. It's marked R because this is the right side. That one's going to be marked L because I'm not exactly sure that they're both the same. I'll just go ahead and make two templates. But I'll peel this off, put it on some good 1/8 inch or 3/16 steel and cut me a bracket. Now the hole in the middle may not be round, it doesn't need to be. I just need to be able to get to the seal and replace it if that ever need be. But what I'll do, instead of doing this, I'll have my plate, I'll have welded nuts onto the plate in the holes where the long bolts go in, and then a sleeve. All that'll be welded solid to this plate. That way we have more pressure on this big round thing, and I could even do a little escutcheon, little angle bracket on each side off of that to keep it where it needs to be. And you know, like I was saying, this axle really shouldn't be touching those bushings. It should just kind of hover and have a nice oil film in between, and that seal stays right in the middle. So if you have this going up and down but the axles aren't moving, you're hitting bumps and it's going like that, well, that's going to tear stuff up. But this time we're just going to go overkill and do it right. Alright, good old Dana Spicer. Just like a lot of transfer cases and differentials I've worked on, it's not that different. It's just smaller and angled different, but got these holes threaded too. And we get some plates going and I'll show you. Alright, well, I just made a small bead, took my finger, went around. I'll get an excess out of a couple of the holes there. You just want a small, thin coating. You just don't want to put a bead all the way around it and then, right? Because then the excess is going to go inside and cause all kind of havoc. So what I'm going to do is get this on here, bolt it on, and I'll show you. Alright, well, there you go. You see the amount of squirt out, and to me that's just what I want to see. It's probably about the same on the inside. If a whole bunch was coming out, there's a whole bunch going in. Shifts good. It takes a little input shaft action for it to shift all the way, so it's shifting. Everything's set up right, I think. So now I'm going to put axle seals on both sides, and then I told you how these holes got stripped out, and that's what caused this whole thing. So this thing would move up and down underneath the motor, and the axles were, you know, going like this, and that's what chewed up my seals and bushings and all that stuff. So I've got a way to permanently remedy to that, I hope. When we get the seals in and my other deal done, and I'll show you. Well, there you go. The little handy brackets. Now again, these holes were not threaded. I just used my 3/8 by 16, which is the same as these holes, then threaded them. They're already drilled, ready to go. They just never were threaded from the factory. So we have this sturdy device, gussets on each, just for extra, you know. We have a nut inside here that's 3/8 by 16, welded to the plate, welded to the spacer, and then the gussets. So instead of having this action, you know, how's that supposed to stay tight? This will. I've got these bolts in just for location to locate, because these bolts will thread into what threads are left. So these are planted with lock washers, and again, red Loctite. Should be no reason I'll ever have to pull those bolts out, and if I do, they'll come out. Give them a little bit of heat. New axle seals on each side, so it's ready to bolt in. You know, I have longer bolts, obviously. That'll work. That plate, the motor plate, goes just like this. And that's the unfortunate thing, is you can't get to this. That's the fill hole. No drain holes. I think it's a lifetime fill situation. I don't know. So I'll probably set it on the floor jack, getting ready to put it in. I'll put some 30 weight motor oil, which is what I've read is what it is, and as long as it's something, I'll put that in there until it starts to come out my axle holes. That'll be good enough. So tomorrow, because I'm going to let this sit overnight, everything set up. Also got RTV just on the outside of that seal, carefully skimmed inside the corner. I've seen these push out in not this type of situation, but automotive transmission situations. They can walk their way out. If you can push those in with your fingers, they can come out. Well, once that stuff sets up, it's not coming out. Same as this one. And again, these are the same seals. I'll do my best to find you guys the part number for the seals and the bushings. And again, the bushings are not the right bushings. You have to cut them and gap them just to where they barely press into that carrier. That's the best thing I could find. So we'll get back on it. hopefully get this thing back in that thing. Well, there it is. It's in there. Mounted up. Got our little brackets right there. So from this point you can see how those brackets are better than this. Everything's Loctited in. New bolts, both sides, ready to go. It's full of oil. It's holding oil. Nothing's leaking. You know. So the next problem I have is another obsolete part that you can't buy. Now I might be able to buy something for $200 or $300 that might have the right bore, different diameter here, so it may work, might not. If it does work, might need a different size belt. I can't find a belt, so I'm gonna go with what we got. This thing sat for, I'm gonna guess, at least 10 years, and right where the belt sat, it just held dirt and crud and rotted out the, they call them sheaves. Pulley halves is what I call them. So I've soaked it with rusty stuff over the last couple weeks. Kept grinding it down, soaking it. So it's got rid of a lot of it. I'm just gonna have to go ahead and, you know, grind her down so I don't have any innies or outies. That's what tears the belt up. Grind it down, get it as flush and smooth as I can. Then I'll probably, you know, do a little body work and paint it. I don't know. What else am I going to do? Well, we'll see what we end up with. Well, that's what I come up with. Doesn't look like it, but this is painted. High gloss Rust-Oleum. I just ground it down, cleaned it up best I could, and this gives it a nice slick surface, sort of like this one here. I did find where I could find one of these for $300. So if it doesn't work out, I'll buy one. The rest of the machine goes good and it lasts a long time, and I may not, you know, as much as we'll ride around on it. Probably be just fine. Need a set of tires. They're dry rotted. I think one on the front has 2 plugs, one on the other side has 3, and a cut on the sidewall that's leaking a little bit. So again, we'll see. We'll just see how this goes, and you know, I'll sink some money into it. Transmission holds up. That's the part that's hard to replace. But tooled around in the yard, adjusted the carburetor, redid my regular gas tank. It leaked where the fitting went in, and the fitting was spinning inside the plastic, so I heated up the fitting with a little propane torch and just held it with a pair of pliers, so I melted that plastic, let it cool off. Now it's just barely tiny seat, and it just hits the ground, so it's fine. You know, fine for now. Yeah, fun stuff. So it's back together. You know, hopefully somebody, if one person got some use out of that little contraption there and that little one there, you got some stuff to cut some steel and you know, rosin core feed welder, make them instead of those stupid little spacers in there. You know, hopefully somebody got some use out of this video and a little something. Anyway, I'm gonna get my carburetor air filter thingy and probably some kind of aluminum flange cover just to cover the whole motor, and other than that, we're done. A pair of headlights, because you know, driving in the middle of the night is a whole lot of fun too. It's actually more fun with no lights, so, but it scares people that are riding with you. Alright, that's it. The Manco Super Deuce is back on the road again. Till next time, fellas. The next video, we're going to get back on that. And there's a high chance I'm going to have a quite awesome surprise. Some of you guys aren't going to think it's so awesome. I'm going to think it's awesome, and you're going to think I'm crazy. But most of you think that already. Alright. Anyway, enough go-kart stuff. Let's get back on some other stuff. See ya. Thanks for watching and hanging out, fellas. fillets.